using hours working on and nobody see any outcome of it. so I will do that today. But you has to deliver a scheme of work. I only a shorter one, so I have scheme of lecture. And as you can see, it's 3 points, and I don't think I will have to go through them. She didn't ask me how long I was going to speak, but the last PEPAYS lecture that I was attending was with Kevin, and he said he would use 38 minutes, so I have somehow thought the same range.
Be careful because she'll time you now.
I just put on the stopwatch.
Okay, good. There you go, good. 4:12 in my watch.
So, as you can see, I will speak a lot about me. But I will also tell you about Norway and a bit of school system in Norway, and especially a bit about some research in the upper secondary schools in Norway for post-primary. I borrowed that from Ireland. In Norway we call them, we come to that. Come to that. Because this is Norway. It has a quite similar amount of inhabitants as Ireland, a bit over 5 million people, but it's larger. Especially it's longer. And if you take put a needle into Oslo, that is the main capital of Norway, and turn it around, you go all the way down to south of Italy, in the northern part. So it's just as long as Europe, in the other direction. And in Oslo, you find my institution. That's it says in the little side there, Norges idrettshøyskole. That's Norwegian School of Sports Sciences in English. That's where I work, and it's placed in Oslo. And if you will see it from a little more distance, it's like this. You got the town down at that side, and you got the woodlands on the other hand, from the institution that's placed here. But at this time of the year, Norway should begin to be more like this, because we have winter with quite stable snow circumstances for about 3-4 months, and it starts about December. So, yeah. So I will say a little bit more about the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences before going to the school system. And it's a specialized university, and has a national responsibility to provide higher education and scientific research in the fields that it's specialized for: physical education, sports sciences, physical activity and health. It has 1,600 full and part-time students, 1,200 full-time. So it's quite a large amount of students, I think, in the PES area. This is only the PES area. It has opportunities to study bachelor, master and doctoral levels, and some courses are taught in English, especially with student international student exchange programs as Norplus and Erasmus. We also have a MAPA, that is a master program that is collaborating with University of Limerick. Bridget is the contact person, yes. If you think what are the specializations, these are the name of the bachelor's directions you can choose in this university. Physical activity and health, coaching and sports psychology, sports management, physical education, teacher education, that's where I belong, and also outdoor education, sort of that department, and sport biology, that's okay. So I will move on to the more broader educational context for what I'm going to speak about. Some of you have heard some of this before, I think. Because in Norway, there are, for most Norwegians, education is free all the way through the educational system. Compulsory school, 10 years, start at 6. Then you have the right to 3 more years in upper secondary school, secondary education, and it's also free for all of the most third years of education. For the first 13 years, PE, physical education, is a compulsory subject for all students in Norway. And PE has been in the school system from the first written curriculum, subject curriculum, that came in Norway in 1848. So it has a history from 1848 to today, but in 1848 it of course was only for the boys, yes. From 1936 it was not obligatoire, but compulsory for every students, every pupils, girls and boys. And from 1974 there have been mixed class in physical education. Not allowed to systematical gender girls for on the one class and boys in another class in physical education. So the last educational reform was in 2006, and in 2006 then they needed a new reform because Norway spent a lot of money on education, but they didn't came out in first place when they was checked internationally on PISA, TIMSS. Have you heard about that? First, that's comparing the students' ability to write, understand language, to calculate in math, and compare languages and rank them. How much outcome they got. TIMSS is mathematics, PISA is broader. Yeah, but also like they also have several other like how good you feel in school, affective sort of measure. Yes. So, but Norway spend most money, but only score like 20 on the ranking in Europe. That's not good. And even other countries that we like to compare with beat us, like Sweden. That's a neighbor, not good. so then they had to do something, they thought. At the same time, there was new research documenting that focus on assessment would have quite a good effect on the learning outcome of to the students. So this reform was underpinned and drawn forward by both an accountability measuring tradition in assessment like PISA, TIMSS and big studies from outside. At the same time, assessment in a formative where you're going to use assessment as a tool for learning and for enhancing the students' learning. The theory around that was also used to promote this new educational reform. So you got new public management as a frame. That's you have freedom. As in Ireland, the system is quite decentralized in the ways that the school and the teachers has nearly total freedom when it comes to method and also part of the content. But the national curriculum and the policy documents and the Department for Education and or their Directorate for Education in Norway states the learning outcomes and the competencies that the students are supposed to achieve at several levels. all subjects. Come back to that in PE in quite a short time. So, but it's decentralized also in assessment, because there are in the subject, it's the teacher that is the main assessor of the students. He both plan, carry through, and assessment, as you know, is a part of already planning. But in Norway we also have a grading system, and he also assigned the grade to the students. The same person who had the responsibility for the whole process. There are a tradition in Norway for having a Directorate of Education has traditionally only taken responsible for the final exams at the end of education. And each student only get 1, 2, 3 exams in 1, 2, 3 subjects. But he don't know what subject he will have exam E in before 2 days before the exam. So you have to prepare for all subjects, and then you get picked out what subject you are going to have. So you have to prepare for all. That's the philosophy in it. And then you will get the exam. But PE is not part of that project or that system, so there are no final exam in PE. So in PE, the grade that you get from your teacher is the grade that's put on the final paper from school. And that grade count as much as all the other grades, including the exams grades, when it comes to go further up in the educational system or to apply for jobs and so on. So the grades are high stakes for the students.
Petra, are there any other grades outside? You get 3 grades for your exams, you get a grade for physical education. Are there any other grades?
Yeah, you got grades in all subjects. And
but only 3 in exam?
Yeah.
3, okay.
So you get, if I've been picked out in history to exam, I will get 2 grades in history. I will get one grade from my teacher, and I will get 1 grade from the exam. And both those grades counts then in the totals.
Is there other subjects that don't have exams?
Yeah. Art and craft. And music. You are not surprised? So the aesthetic or practical aesthetic part of the subjects do not have national exams. But it will be quite hard also, I think, to have a practical exam in physical education when there are nearly total method and content freedom. Okay, we are going to test you in football in a national exam. At your school, you have only done hurling and Gaelic football, and we will national exam is in soccer. That's a very good alignment. So, it probably is a challenge in a decentralized system with a practical subject to make those large exams.
And what's the rationale behind telling kids 2 or 3 days before they actually have an exam?
That's I think there are pragmatic, like economic. You won't have exams for all subjects, but they want them to prepare and work, use it as a motivation for working in all the subjects. If it works that way, that's another thing. Okay, but we are going to focus on PE. So then the subject curriculum and assessment in PE have competence aims after several levels or years in education. Each of these steps point out after fourth year, 7th year, 10th year, 11, 12, and 13 year of education, the curriculum state the learning outcomes or the competencies that the students are supposed to have achieved at that level. And after 13 years, you should be able to be active throughout the life course. That's the ending part here. And if we see compulsory subject through 13 years, this says how many hours they have in PE. That's a total of 873 hours of PE. And that's nearly one whole school year with PE. That's not so bad. It's the third largest subject in hours in compulsory school in Norway. It's only math and Norwegian language that has more hours than PE. And even though that's the fact from the numbers, PE teachers in Norway says that we have no time to do PE. Of course they don't, because if they are going to promote health or something like that, they should have it every day. So, but they only have it once, twice a week. So, grading starts from year 8 and onward. And after 10th year, after compulsory school, the grade you get will count for what you can choose in upper secondary school. So that's high stake. And also when you're finished, if you are entering higher education or teacher education, the PE grades will count in the apply for that. So that's high stake also for the students. Everything between here of assessment is stated in the new curriculum to be promotive or formative assessments. They should be ongoing assessments helping the students to learn. That's when you get a grade here, it should be used formative, the curriculum says. Okay, so that's part of it. But what does this competence aim, learning outcomes formulation look like? You get some examples. After year 4, the first level, it's like feel safe in water and be able to swim. What does it mean to be able to swim? Okay, that you can figure out. That the teacher has to figure that out. But it says that the students, when they are become 9, 10 years old, PE should secure and have provided them with the competence to feel safe in water and be able to swim. It also says that they should explore and play with different rhythms and express them in physical activity. After the year 10, you can see some progression. From this one to swim the breaststroke, crawl and backstroke and dive. Okay. After year 12, this is one from outdoor adventure education or outdoor education part of the curriculum. Plan, carry out and assess trips in the countryside and explain how food, gear and clothing may influence the perception of nature. These are competencies that students should achieve. So, these competence aims are what assessment are guided by. And that counts both for grading and ongoing assessment or classroom assessment. They should be done according to the competence aims. But the teachers, of course, has to formulate learning goals on their way, because some of these you can't just say, okay, I start with the 6-year-old as a teacher, and in 4 years they are going to learn to swim. And I have, of course, have to have some goals on my way to work on and assess. But these are the competencies that you are working ahead or against. Okay, so then we have placed the Norwegian PE teachers in the role of AFL, that's Assessment for Learning. AOL, that's Assessment of Learning. Assessment for Learning, that's something that goes on during the process, trying to help and formative the students' learning and help them in this process. Assessment of Learning traditionally comes after ending and stating what you have achieved, and probably also the gaps from what you were supposed to have achieved. So the PE teachers are in both that roles as a coach. You don't recognize this guy, but I put him there. It's Ole Gunnar Solskjær, former Manchester United player from Norway. He's a coach for Molde, and I put him there because this summer they kicked out Sligo Rovers from Champions League. Okay. Yeah, you didn't know. Okay. And this is only a soccer judge. So that's it. But the teacher are going to coach and help the students learn, but they are also responsible for the ending and final grade that is high stake and somehow a judgment more than an assessment. We are going to look at this part of the PE teacher, for this is the interesting part. What they do here, that's of course interesting, but that's only at the end. It's helping them during the process, that is the interesting part. And heading for assessment for learning, you should remember that how to define that concept still is an ongoing discourse in the theoretical part of the field. So, assessment in physical education is a hot potato in Norway. When the new curriculum reform started, it becomes a lot of discussions. What does this mean? Assessment for learning. And it says you should not assess effort. That's the curriculum says that in the articulated. And the PE teacher said, we have always assessed effort. so they go like, no, you should measure the learning outcomes when it comes. And it's the competencies in the subject. Effort is something you do to get the outcomes. The directorate tried to explain. And this made it a hot potato, and it was so much discussed in the field of PE at Norway just got a revised curriculum in PE, not in other subjects, because of this discussion around assessment. So now PE teachers are allowed to assess effort, defined in a way. Okay. In general, there is a lack of research in PE in Norway. We don't know what is going on, what the practices are around. We know they differ a lot, vary, but research have no documentation of how assessment or PE is carried out in school in Norway. We know much more about Sweden. And when it comes to assessment, this is not only a Norwegian internationally, it has also been said that it was strange that it hasn't got more attention when it has been a large research area in more general education. So if you go back, we find that maybe it can have to do something also with that PE teacher was suspicious and not so, and a bit skeptical to assessment. Like all articles from the 80s and 90s, like it's Nice from 86 and Hensley and collaborators from 87 and Matanin and Tannehill from 1994. Old, 1994. It has this easy, straightforward title, Assessment and Grading in Physical Education. It's a classic article. And they say that PE teachers somehow think that assessing students or putting marks or grades to them in physical education, that somehow contradict the goals with the subject. So we don't want grades, we don't want to do assessment. A lot of the teachers says in these studies. However, in this year, a review of alternative assessment says that they find genuine progress in an area that has been fraught with difficulties for physical educators. But they add that such innovative practices is, however, far from regular, integral, widespread, and educational productive. But they see there are more alternative assessment now than before, okay? But it's also noted that we need to know more, and especially another review or research that looked at it says that textbooks and academic literature, they simply reiterate to the reader that assessment need to be authentic. Unfortunately, many of these texts fall short when demonstrating how this is going to happen. So this is a especially challenge for PE teacher when they are supposed to enact or implement assessment for learning. They don't have descriptions of how to do it. There are nobody that has done it and described it and explored it. So there are no experiences to build on. How should I do assessment for learning in physical education? Even in the textbooks, it's a disappointing lack of practical examples these days. And there are some other challenges as well, and that's the students. They don't orientate. Assessment for learning, expect the students to orientate for learning goals. Do students do that? In a recent study of video in the physical education class published this year in Sport, Education and Society by Mikael Kvennerstedt, he looked into Swedish PE. He writes about the students are more like ends in view than learning goals. And what's ends in view? Yeah, that an example can be, I'm in love with a girl in the class, and my main goal by attending PE class is hopefully I will get close to her physically during class. Is that a learning goal in PE? No, it's my main goal by attending PE class for this period, of course. Assessment for learning, try to make the student orientate for learning goals. That's a challenge. But the student should be informed about it. And maybe if he has to do some assessing of himself, maybe the student can be aware of that he has several views at the same, several ending views at the same time, several goals at the same time. Okay. There are of course other challenges as well that can be more serious for the students. In this book that Mary O'Sullivan and MacPhail edited about youngsters, Kimberly Oliver, writes about the States, about, for example, how girls who want to be a girly girl.
Why are you looking at me?
Because I want to come close to you.
Send the copy of this to his wife.
You want to be a girly girl, and these girls somehow think that a lot of the activities in physical education don't fit the role model of being, or their impression or perception of what a girly girl is to be like. And then they don't participate because of that. So that's a part of the challenges with assessment for learning as a whole thinking project. So, in 2002, Stiggins wrote that there was an assessment crisis because assessment for learning was documented to have good effect on students' learning, but it was nowhere in the policy documents around the world. That has changed. And in Norway, it's changed in 2006. So then we shouldn't have no assessment crisis anymore, because he was speaking about the policy level, political level, and what I will speak about now is the micro level. And I will present some result about the realization of assessment for learning in Norwegian upper secondary school. And then I will just take this short, you will get them afterwards. To define AFL, I use 4 key principles, and I have adopted them from Black and William, Paul Black and Bill William. They're inside the black box, and that also was some research of Black and William that underpinned the new reform in Norway. So it's coincidence, guys? Coincidence? How do you say coincidence? I don't know. No, it's like... yeah. And the same 4 key principles, McPhail and Halbert, used by when they looked at the assessment for learning in Ireland.
Is that 2010, Deborah?
Yeah.
This century.
So the purpose of the study is to examine the extent to which assessment practices in Norwegian is and you can read the research question. If you're going to do research, the research question should be clear. Okay? So, how do the teacher's intentions and the students' perceptions of assessment practices in PE reflect the AFL key principles, the 4 that I showed? This was carried out in 6 upper secondary schools. So it's based on a survey among 1,500 students and a focus group with 23 PE teachers. That's all the PE teachers at the schools, at the 6 schools, without one that had fallen sick on the day of the focus group. The student survey used a Likert scale. Likert? Yeah. From 1 to 5 for totally agree to totally disagree, or never to 10 times. Something is easier to count on times than in the agreement. So, but it's a 5-point Likert scale in the survey. So, to the findings. The first key principle, sharing learning intentions and the success criteria. Do the teachers do that? Or do the students perceive that they do it? Let us see. Students, do you know the competence aims in physical education? This is no. This is yes. This year in PE, how many times have you spoken or heard about the competence aims? This is never. This is once. 10 times. Over 1/3 of the students express not to be familiar with the competence aims. But they know the criteria for the different grading in PE. Totally agree. I do know what I have to do to get a better grade mark in PE. Totally agree. What can that mean? They don't know the competence aims, they don't know the curriculum, learning outcome goals, but they know what they have to do to get a better grade. Probably, as research in Sweden has suggested or found, the teachers do grading on other criteria than you find in the regulations for assessment and grading. They have their own criteria, or do it like on the stomach feeling. Oh, he's a 4, grade 4, okay? But she is only 2. It's from 1 to 6, where 6 is excellent competence in Norway, and 1 is low competence.
Could it,
Oh.
could it have anything to do with the terminology, too, that the students aren't familiar with the terminology, outcomes, and,
Yeah, but they should be,
yeah.
so... But that's a fair interpretation. Okay. It was 12 what I started?
Yeah, so your time's up.
Okay.
That was a nice way of saying something else.
Just ignore Peter, just carry on in tomorrow.
Yeah. Until 5 o'clock. Tea. Okay. Next is engineering effective classroom discussions and other learning tasks that elicit evidence of student understanding. That's not easy to measure in a survey, so I go right to the teachers' comments. And in one focus group, a teacher, when he is asked, they don't come up with speaking about formative practices before the researcher asked them about it, and then when he asked about the assessment for learning, one PE teacher start. It must be against something. You mean for learning? Well, the first that comes to my mind is motivation, directed towards something. I'm going to improve some. It is a motivation towards something, isn't it? He doesn't know the concept of assessment for learning, even though it's one of the regulations that he's supposed to use, and it's stated quite clear in the new curriculum system. So, okay, but there are brighter examples. So this is an opposite, where I also think that one of those a bit special things in physical education is that there is movement. It is skill, practical tasks and learning. Much of what you do, it is not necessary to try to put so much in words. You can arrange a situation that makes them, in a way, progress. So, it means assessment for learning also has to do with what you do and the choices, how you construct and conduct your PE class, or what you're going to do, your instruction. So that's a quite clear, a better understanding of assessment for learning. So now we can say. It's also just to not ignore that. Providing feedback, the third key principle. This year, how many times have you got feedback on how to improve your competence in PE? This is never. %. Once. And I got feedback on how I'm doing in PE. This is complete disagree, totally disagree. This is totally disagree. So you can see that nearly 1/3 of the students express that they never get feedback on how they can improve their competence in PE. one of three students. When asked about it. Do they involve students in assessing their own and other students' work, peer and self-assessment? They totally disagree. Peer assessment. This year in PE, how many times have you been engaged in assessing your own work? Never. Oh, 10 times. Have you made self-assessment on paper? There are several other questions, of course, in the survey, but these three gives a quite clear impression that the majority of the students express not to be involved either in self or peer assessment. And what does the teacher says about this in the focus group? On self-assessment, I would say we have been in a bit of an exploring phase, so we tried a little different. One example can be that you take thumbs up if you feel that you understand and can do, thumbs to side if you feel you are like medium, and thumbs down if you think you are not doing so very well. Okay, that's one example. Here's telling a practical example of how to do it. I take critique on that, another say, in another school. I do ask the students too little about what they think about themselves. When asked about self-assessment, and says that is. And another one says that last year I tried out some things that I had not done before. For example, that students are being engaged in self-assessment. So this is something new. It's something that the teachers are trying to explore, but they don't know how to do it. They are just working on getting experience. Maybe they can provide us, and you can provide us with, in the future, with how to do this in a good manner in a moving subject as PE. And what about peer assessment? The teacher says, no, I never done that. I've tried it once this year, yes, and then we did some during the athletic period as well. And another one says in another school, I've not used peer assessment, but I remember asked about it, and the reaction to it was relatively negative. Peer assessment seems to be a blank from the teacher's view. But that's probably because they connected to grading and so on, because I think they have some practices where they use peer to look at each other and so on. But they don't think yet of that as assessment, even if it's probably the main issue about assessment for learning and formative assessments when it comes to peer. But we are not, or the teachers are not able to think that way yet. We don't have the vocabulary to speak about it probably, proper, I think. So there are some challenges in this that comes out of it. So if I'm going to stop to T, so we have to do some short conclusions. So the students' perceptions of assessment practice in PE for over half of the students do not reflect the 4 key principles that we define AFL along with, and the PE teachers as a total group has no clear understanding of AFL yet. So we can say that this is a long way to go, not to Tipperary, but before we talk about the shift from AOL to AFL. What is emphasized in the curriculum in Norwegian upper secondary school. And this is then a conclusion that is incongruent with the intentions and theory behind the reforming of regulation in the knowledge promotion from 2006. So, do we then see an assessment crisis on the micro level, even if it's not there on the political level still? Well, Smith says that to rethink assessment from ground in schools, which probably is the case, teachers need substantial knowledge as well as motivation to do this. It seems like Norwegian teachers, some of them at least, are trying. They are exploring self-assessment and so on, trying to do something new at the moment. But they and understanding that integrating AFL also will be part of their professional development. And Bennett, he says that it is doubtful that the average teacher has that knowledge. So most teachers will need substantial time and support to develop it. As we saw earlier, the descriptions is lacking, the experience or examples don't exist. So you have to construct them, or to a large extent then. So this represents both a challenge and a great responsibility to PE teachers, of course, but also to teacher educators. Some of them are here, I think. And PE teachers, students, yes, okay. And researchers, as well as policymakers and the Directorate for Education.
Related to your last point there, how long, for how many years have you been teaching teachers to use assessment for learning? How many years have you been doing that?
Yeah, I've done it all the time. I've been in teacher education. But looking back to when I attended teacher education in the late 80s, we don't have assessment as a subject at all. So,
Yeah, well, because we for years had what was called tests and measurement, which was a form of assessment, I guess, but
accountability.
yeah, but we have like for the last, at least the last 8 years, taught assessment for learning. However, our students coming in as first-year students are still saying at this point that they have not had any assessment in physical education. And so I guess my question is, do you think that the professional development, continuing professional development is where we're going to be able to get teachers to really understand assessment for learning?
Yeah.
And do you have that? Do you have professional development for teachers?
It's a great there are a great challenge in time, and one is time. I think it has to be allocated to them to come together and speak, and it's of course also as Moses is speaking about that to get real professional development, you somehow has to feel at home in the group you are working with also. There is an atmosphere for cheering and for supporting each other, both when it's hard times and when you experience good times.
I think assessment for learning is harder for students to grasp than traditional assessment. So the students that go out on exchange, the third-year undergraduates that go to America for the semester, they come back and they get a much better grasp of assessment because a lot of that is like test banks, multiple choice. It's tangible. Now they have a certain philosophy, but they see it. They appreciate traditional assessment from going back to the American system. And because we don't necessarily, because we are more assessment for learning, I think it is more difficult for pre-service teachers or students here to grasp assessment.
Well, see, I find that fascinating because we didn't use the more formal assessment in most of the places in America when I was. We did the formative assessment. We used assessment for learning. We didn't call it assessment for learning, but we did the alternative kind of formative assessment. So for our students to go back there and be in institutions that are using the more traditional, I think that's unfortunate because that's not the way they all are.
So, but I think it's what we're touching at here is, of course, you and we are the future of physical education, and so at least at this time in PE teacher education program, you are working on assessment and assessment for learning, and will have some experiences when you go into practice and some understanding with you. The teachers that's out there don't have that from teacher education,
Mhm.
most of them. That's
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of the points you made.
So that you all will be the role models to help them understand how to do assessment for learning.
No pressure.
No pressure. I used to say that, I comment on this before, but it's, if you're going to plant a new idea in a teacher room, or where you're coming to a school, you should be certain about two things. You should have support from your leadership, and you should at least have one other colleague that believe in the same as you at that school. If you are alone, I think I would rather try to change my own practice with my students first, not implant it in the school. Okay, you can figure why I say this. So, I would say that rather than stating the absence of AFL that I've shown in Norwegian upper secondary school as an assessment crisis, I should think that we already have done, interpret it as an opportunity for teacher development, as a professional development, working on AFL. It's part of working on assessment this way, is part of being a better teacher. And if the teacher realizes that assessment for learning is not when you get it to work, it's not meaning that it should be a burden, not a more workload. It's about working smarter. How to work just as much as you do, but get the kids to learn more. Because assessment for learning is not about primary how I teach. That was the old focus in teacher education. But it's about what are the outcomes? What do the learners learn? And that is the focus of all of it. So when we are asking questions, we should ask about the learning of the students. And then we also get feedback on what we are doing while teaching or trying to facilitate learning. But if we are just looking at what I'm doing, performing as a teacher, what actually the goals of education is behind the curtains. That's why it's a bit of teacher development, but also our subject, PE, suffer from a lack of clear content knowledge. What is PE? Okay, we have the curriculum, but we know that in Norway also, practice, there is a lot of football. But the curriculum says nothing about football. But the teacher says that they use quite a lot of time on football when you ask them what they are doing. And they speak a lot about and give examples of different skills, often from like games, sport, games. You very seldom get examples from capoeira, tai chi, yoga, and so on when you speak about assessment or outdoor education. So I think by focusing the learning and what are we going to support, or what are the students going to carry with them when they are coming to the 13 level and going to the life course? What is the goal for all students, not for the sporting or athletic ones and so on, but for all students, each of them? That I think can, by AFL, Assessment for Learning, assessing more on the learning of each student than on grading, I think that can develop the subject as well. Okay. This list you can't read, and that was meant so.
Okay, thanks, Fred.